Hello everyone, welcome to a Merry Little Christmas. I had so much fun yesterday figuring out our pattern and cutting things out, and so now I'm all ready to sew it together. But first I want to talk to you a little bit about what to cut out and how to cut it out. So this is going to be a two-part class. The first part, today we're going to cut everything out, and then the next class I'll show you how to sew everything together. So I'll talk about how to make flying geese perfect every single time so that you will never ever cut off another point again. So let's get started with cutting this out. Now you know that we talked about making our little tree so that all of our stripes on our tree are just out of one strip of fabric, not all cut up, so that your words can go nice and straight across. So I hope that you've been kind of looking at your fabric and touching it and thinking about it a little bit. So I cut out all of my strips, and what I did on the instruction sheet, here's Marley. What I did on our instruction sheet was to renumber the rows, and you can't really see it from here, but I'll show it to you up close. I renumbered our rows so that at the top, the very smallest row is number 1, and the largest row on the bottom is number 16. So I cut my strips, and all of my strips were cut out of 4.5-inch strips. So you're going to cut, 6 4.5-inch strips, and then I tell you in your instruction sheet exactly what 2 strips to cut out of each row so that you can get them all cut out and not run out of any fabric. Now I had plenty of fabric left over, which would make sense because we're cutting fewer squares and more strips. I actually cut an extra strip because I was doing one when I was videotaping, and then forgot that I had cut that one and cut them again. So you're going to have like this much fabric left over. So you have quite a bit of green left over, which is kind of nice because you never know if something's going to happen. So the first thing that I do when I cut out fabric is I take my fabric over to my cutting station and I spray it with Best Press and press it out nice and flat. What that does, it kind of fuses the 2 layers of your fabric together. The Best Press also helps to keep your fabric from raveling as you're working with it and sewing. And it gives your fabric a little bit more body, which makes it a little easier to work with as well. As I was cutting out my green, I didn't really want to have to cut each strip out open. So thank you, Marley. So I put a pin in. If you remember way back when we would sew garment clothing and we would sew plaids, and we would pin our plaids so all our plaids would line up as we went along. Well, that's the same kind of thing that I did with this little stripe and the words. So I lined up the squiggles and I put little pins in periodically to hold my rows going straight. That way I could cut my 4.5-inch strip and it would be nice and straight right along my little squiggle line. So I cut those 4.5-inch strips out. Then I subcut them into whatever sizes I needed, and you're going to need a variety. Oops, those are extras. And then I put pins in and I numbered all of my rows as I went along. And so on the instruction sheet in red, it will show you what row you are cutting, all the way from 1 until 16. Yes, Marley Boo. So that's the green. So you're going to cut out all of those. So those are all just strips some are by 32, some are by 8 inches, some are by 28.5. So you're going to get all those cut out, number them, and set them aside. I cut those out first, basically because I knew that was the area of the pattern that we were going to adjust the most. And it would make sense that we would have plenty of fabric, but I just wanted to make sure we would have plenty of fabric. And we do. Obviously, we've got a bunch of that left over. The next thing that I cut was our solid cream fabric. So you're going to cut 8 3/4 by 4 3/4 inch rectangles, and you're going to cut 25 of those. I got a little string on there. Then you're going to cut 29 4.5-inch squares, a 5.5 and a 5-inch square. Don't ask, we're going to use these later. Okay. And a whole bunch, 14 little 1-inch squares. And we'll talk about those when we're sewing things together. So we're cutting the rectangles and the squares for our flying geese a little bit bigger. We sew them together and then we square them up. And I'll show you how to do that in our next video. So that's why you're cutting these a little bit bigger, and I wanted to check and make sure that we would have enough fabric if we cut things a little bit bigger. I only cut these about 1/4 of an inch bigger, basically because we needed a whole bunch of these red plaid squares, and if we cut them 1/2 an inch bigger, which is really what I like to do because it's just easier for measuring, we would not have had enough fabric. But we could cut it 1/4 of an inch bigger than what the instructions tell us and still have enough fabric, still have our blocks a little bit bigger, and be able to square those up perfectly in the end. So that's your cream fabric. In fact, for the cream, and I had that written down on my scrap paper here someplace, for the cream we have 45 inches left over, and we actually need 28 inches for our inner border, which we're going to cut later. And that inner border, I think, was 8. You cut 8 3.5-inch strips for your inner border. So you've got plenty left over for the inner border from your cream. Unless I forgot to cut something, but I don't think I did, but we'll find out. Okay, then I cut my red berries. I cut those next. And for those, I cut, again, 4 3/4 inch rectangles by 8 3/4 inch rectangles, and those we need 25. And then you need to cut squares, and you're cutting 25 4.5-inch squares. These are going to be some cornerstones in there on our little flying geese stars. So those are the corner squares for some of those. So those we did not cut any bigger, but the rectangles we did. And then we need I think this is a 5-inch square. Red berries, 1 5-inch square. Then you're going to set those aside. Then the next thing I cut was the white plaid. That was very simple. We needed the white plaid. We're going to cut 3 3.5-inch squares and 12 2 1/4-inch squares. Okay, those are going to be some little flying geese stars in 3 blocks. So that's those. Cut those, set those aside. And here again, we needed, I cut those, and I cut the little 2.5-inch, 2 1/4-inch squares a little bit larger. And for the red plaid, we need that for the binding and the outer border. And for the binding and the outer border all together, we needed 50.5 inches, and I had 57 inches left over. So we've got plenty to work with there. Then the red plaid. The red plaid was the most daunting and the most time consuming because along with the white plaid, the red plaid, I cut that open because there was no way to get me, it was just too hard to line up your plaids and get a nice straight cut. So I opened up the fabric and cut each strip singly, not with the fabric folded together, and then cut my squares. From that, you need 4 3/4-inch squares, and you're going to cut 98. Yes, I know, 98. I thought it was going to take me forever, but it didn't. You're going to cut 11 strips, and I tell you how many strips you need to cut and then what to subcut. In the instructions, they don't tell you how to do that or what to do. They just said you need 12 of these, 14 of these, 15 of those, 13 of those. They don't tell you cuts. I kind of like it when they tell you you're going to need about 3 strips at 4.5 and then subcut them into this so that I kind of know that I'm on track. Otherwise, you kind of don't know if you're on track or not. So you're going to cut for the red plaid 11 4 3/4-inch squares or strips by width of fabric. And then you're going to cut your 4 3/4-inch squares out of those. And then in the end, you're going to need 1 4.5-inch square and 1 5.5-inch square. It's written in the instructions. So that's what you're going to need out of the red plaid. And that's the one that I had the least amount left over. I had about this much left and about this much left. So I didn't have much red plaid left in the end, but you don't need it for anything else. So hopefully you will okay for you. If you miscut, that might be a little bit of a problem. I have a little bit left over. If you need some, we can always get more. So that's my story on that. So those are all the things that you're going to cut. I'm going to wait and cut my plaids for my borders and my cream for my inner border and my binding last. So I'm going to do one of the most fun parts of cutting out this project is cutting out your little panel pieces. They are so cute, and it's fun to see them up close and look at all the detail that's in every single square. These squares are going to be 8.5 inches, and I used my 8.5 inch Creative Grid ruler, lined it up in kind of fussy cut, made sure my little guys were right in the center, cut all the way around each one, and went on to the next. You have plenty of space around each panel piece to cut your 8.5 inches. Sometimes they put those panel pieces so close together that it's really hard sometimes to get 1/4 of an inch without cutting off part of your pattern. So the little picture really shows up nice. The only place that I had one that was a little bit dicey was this one, and I don't know if you can, and I'll show it to you up close. Part of the word Mary is up in this corner. Just the little loop of the Y is caught up here. If you cut that off, you're going to end up cutting off the top part of your, and you don't want to do that. So in the 1/4 inch, this little loop from the Mary will go away, and you'll be just fine. But that one's a little bit close, and then that ruined the writing of the Merry Christmas. So I thought I could use that and do a special project with that, but that ruined the Merry. So now I've got Have Yourself, which was fine, Christmas. Have yourself a Christmas. We could do something with that. Maybe not. So that kind of ruined my idea of using those words and making a special project or incorporating them into the back, maybe. I still might do that, and then I'll just cut off the little loop on the bottom of the Mary, but I might use that as part of my back, which would be kind of fun. So we'll see. I'm still thinking about it, but 8.5 inches, and you're going to cut out, I think was there 9 or 12? I think there's 9. There's 2, 4, 6, 9. Yep. So there's going to be 9 of these little guys. They are so fun. I really like them. So happy cutting. If you have any questions, my information is in your kit and on your cutting instructions, so you know where to get a hold of me. And I will email you the login or the link for the video. So you can stop the video, go back, listen, watch, listen, watch, listen, watch. So cut the green and then come back, cut the cream and then come back and watch. Go back and forth, whatever you need. So if you have any questions, just give me a call, email me, text me, and I'm happy to help you out in any way that you need. So happy cutting, and I will see you soon, ready to sew. Thanks. Bye-bye.